Today, we're diving into the incredible story of an embryology professor, a scientist who spent 30 years looking at life through a microscope, only to be confronted by an ancient text that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the world and about science itself. So this is where she's coming from, not just neutral, but deeply skeptical. For her, God was a crutch, an invention for people who couldn't handle the quiet, hard facts of the universe. Her world was the laboratory, a place of data, measurement, and the silent, beautiful logic of science. And for 3 decades, that lab was her entire world. She taught embryology at a top university, published papers, and mentored the next generation of scientists. Her whole identity, her entire way of thinking, was built on a rock-solid foundation of rational, evidence-based thought. And you really have to appreciate just how deep this went. She knew every single stage of human development, the exact day, the shape, the cellular changes. If you couldn't measure it, test it, and replicate it, it simply wasn't real. To her, anything supernatural was just noise. And this is the mind that's about to encounter a piece of data that just doesn't fit. The whole thing starts on a totally ordinary, rainy Tuesday. A few of her graduate students walk into her office. They don't have a problem, they have a question. They want her expert opinion, comparing some descriptions from an old text to modern science. It seemed routine, but it was the start of everything. Now, this is the most important part of the entire story, how they asked her. They handed her a slip of paper with a few lines of translated text. That's it. No author, no date, no title, no source. It was a completely blind test. She was looking at it as a pure scientific puzzle with zero bias. And here it is, the question that kicked the whole thing off. They just ask her, "Doctor, as the expert in this room, where in the timeline of an embryo's development would you place these descriptions?" Simple as that. So she puts on her scientist hat and gets to work, applying those 30 years of knowledge to these strange, ancient terms. She's expecting a quick academic exercise, a fun little puzzle, and then back to her real work. The first term she sees is alica. The translation provided is a leech-like substance, something that clings. Okay, just a couple of words on a piece of paper. What in the world could that possibly refer to in embryology? But she didn't even have to think about it. The recognition was instantaneous and a little unnerving. The embryo at day 24. It's curved, it clings to the wall of the uterus, and it literally draws blood from the mother to survive. Both its shape and its function are remarkably like a leech. It was a shockingly perfect match. Okay, weird, but maybe a coincidence. Then she reads the next term, mudca, translated as a chewed-like substance. And this one really got her attention. Her mind jumped straight to the somite stage, around day 28 or 30. This is when the embryo develops these little segments along its back. And you know what they look like? They look exactly like teeth marks in a piece of clay or gum. She'd seen photos of it 1,000 times, but the word chewed, it was a description so perfect, she couldn't believe she'd never thought of it herself. But this next part is where it went from interesting to just impossible. The final 2 terms described a sequence of events. First, bones are formed. Then, flesh and muscle develop and wrap around the bones. It wasn't just the descriptions that were right, the order was right. And in embryology, that specific order is absolutely critical. And here's the kicker. This is where her scientific brain just slammed on the brakes. Knowing that sequence, that bones form and then flesh clothes them, isn't something you can see with the naked eye. It took modern science, with powerful microscopes and imaging technology, centuries to figure that out. There is just no way, absolutely no way, anyone in the ancient world could have known this. And just like that, the fun academic puzzle was over. It was now a personal crisis. The scientific analysis was done, the matches were made, and there was only one question left that mattered. After analyzing these impossibly accurate, impossibly sequenced descriptions, this was the only thing she needed to know. The data was too precise, too anomalous. She had to know the source. And then her students told her, quietly. The text was from the Quran, written in the 7th century. And in that moment, 3 decades of scientific certainty, her entire map of the world began to crack. And to really understand the shock, you have to put this in context. The scientific understanding in the 7th century, which came from the Greeks like Aristotle, was that a tiny, perfectly formed little human was just curled up inside the sperm. They had zero concept of developmental stages. So to have a text from that exact same period describing a leech-like stage, a chewed-like stage, and the correct sequence of bone and flesh, it wasn't just ahead of its time. It was from another world. So what does a good scientist do when they find data that completely upends their worldview? They don't just accept it, they attack it. They try to disprove it. And that's exactly what she did next, turning her full scientific training on this problem to find a rational explanation. She ran through the entire skeptical checklist. Was this just a massive coincidence, a lucky guess? Was the language vague enough that you could read anything into it? Was she just seeing what she wanted to see now that she knew the source? She tried every angle to debunk it, but none of it worked. And the reason it didn't work was because of her own rigorous method. She couldn't claim it was motivated reasoning because her reasoning had been completely blind. She analyzed the data before she knew where it came from. The experiment, her student's little test, had been clean. Her investigation then led her to the work of Dr. Keith Moore, a giant in the field of embryology, one of the world's top experts. And she found out he'd already been down this road and had come to the same stunning conclusion. He found the chronic descriptions so accurate and precise that he actually included them in later editions of his own definitive medical textbook. This was no longer just her little puzzle. This was peer review at the highest level. In science, when the data consistently contradicts your hypothesis, you don't throw out the data. You have to be willing to throw out the hypothesis. Her long, rigorous intellectual journey was forcing her toward a new conclusion, a new hypothesis that could actually account for all the evidence she'd seen. And this was the final realization, the moment it all clicked into place. For 30 years, she had been in absolute awe of the breathtaking complexity, the elegant engineering of human development. She knew the what and the how better than almost anyone on the planet. But that data from that ancient text finally forced her to ask the one question she'd never thought to ask: who? Ultimately, her story is about a scientist who had a perfect map of the world. Until one day, she discovered a piece of data that existed somewhere completely off the page. And it leaves all of us with a pretty profound question. When the facts you find no longer fit your understanding of reality, do you ignore the facts? Or do you have the courage to draw a new map,